You are listening to Small Business Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives small business owners the straight talk on productivity, time management, business systems, leading your teams, strategic decision-making, and mindset. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the productivity specialist.
Welcome, and thank you so much for listening to the Small Business Straight Talk podcast. Today is episode 421, The ADHD Brain in Business, Why You're Not Broken, with Diann Wingert. If you're a successful, busy, small business owner who wants the straight talk on what it takes to maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. If you have ever said yes to every opportunity that came your way and then wondered how you got so overcommitted, or if you've started something with so much excitement only to abandon it when the newness wore off, today's conversation is going to hit home. Whether you identify with ADHD, suspect you might, or just recognize these patterns in yourself, this episode will change the way you think about how you're wired and how you run your business. I'm so excited to be bringing back our guest, Diann Wingert. Diann has been a guest. We will link out to that in the show notes, her previous amazing episode. But I wanted to bring her back to have a deeper conversation with us today. Let me tell you a little bit about Diann. Diann is a former psychotherapist and serial business owner who decided to combine her two passions to become a business coach for entrepreneurs with ADHD traits. Diann helps clients to focus, follow through, and finish what they start, and lean into leveraging their ADHD as a business asset. Diann hosts the top-rated ADHD-ish podcast, is a practicing Buddhist, and loves strong coffee, dark fiction, and laughing out loud. She is on a mission to support neurodivergent entrepreneurs and founders to balance passion, purpose, and profit. Diann has been called the speaker of uncomfortable truths and believes that neurodiversity is the most powerful source of creativity, imagination, and innovation. Well, let's wait no further. Let's meet our guest and get to the straight talk. Welcome back, Diann. Thank you so much for being here.
I will hang out with you anytime, any place, anywhere. So.
Yes. We met back in face-to-face. I think it was like 2017-ish.
Oh my God.
Yep. And you were a guest on the podcast many years ago. And I reached out to you to tap you because I have been following your work and I just think it's so relevant. And I cannot wait to have this conversation for myself, but also especially for our listeners. So I'm going to share your official bio in the intro, or by the time someone's listening. I've already done that. But why don't you just jump off and share a little bit about yourself that we didn't hear in your official bio, and why is talking about ADHD so important for you?
Well, thank you for inviting me back. And this is going to promise to be a very insightful and inspiring conversation with probably quite a few laughs and a lot of head nodding of those listening. You know, I began to question whether I had ADHD in the 90s when I was in graduate school to become a psychotherapist. My oldest son had by that time already been diagnosed. And many, many years later, my daughter was diagnosed as well. My second son chose not to be. And I was the last one in the pack after questioning it for 20 years. And I think this kind of brings me to the point where lots and lots and lots of small business owners, creatives, freelancers, entrepreneurs, and independent professionals of all stripes identify with these traits. Now, there's been a dramatic increase in the number of people being diagnosed with ADHD in recent years, but it's not necessary to be officially diagnosed to know this is who you are and how you are and to begin to manage it better than you have. And that's what I've built my business around.
Yes. Okay. Incredible. So right before we were getting ready to hit record, I was like stumbling over my words and I was like ADHD, ADD. I'm like, hold on. What is the proper way to address this? And you had such a great response. So I just wanted to just share that. So we're going with ADHD because your answer to me was, well, do you want to be, what'd you say? Do you want to be accurate? And I'm like, yes, accurate.
Yes.
However, terminology is ADD often. So what is the
Yeah.
difference and yeah, just share with us what that difference is.
Absolutely. So many people use the term ADD. And I jokingly say we tend to be impatient people who like to get to the point and get on with it. So 3 letters is quicker to say than 4. Also, you notice that when we say ADHD, a lot of people stumble over them, even people who have ADHD and have probably said it more than most. The accurate clinical term is ADHD. However, many people identify as ADD, not just because it's a shortcut, but because they don't necessarily identify as hyperactive. What's missing from the conversation is that you don't have to be hyperactive to have ADHD. There are actually 3 different subtypes. 2 of them include hyperactive traits and impulsive traits, but one of them doesn't. So there are plenty of people who have ADHD without the H, and you'll find many of them prefer to use the term ADD to describe themselves. But if we want to be accurate, and
Yes.
sometimes we are sticklers for accuracy, the accurate term is ADHD.
Okay. So many of my listeners and clients identify with ADHD tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
Few have actually been diagnosed. Like over
Mm-hmm.
a decade, nearly 15 years of doing this, very few have actually been diagnosed. Why do you think so many people identify but do not get diagnosed?
I think some people don't fully identify with having any kind of a diagnosable mental health condition.
Mm,
If you think about what ADHD stands for, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, those are 2 trigger words right in the label, deficit and disorder.
mm,
I think there's a lot of people who have had these traits ever since they were a child and got a lot of negative feedback for them,
mhm,
especially those who are more hyperactive and impulsive, who had a hard time sitting still, staying quiet, and keeping their hands to themselves. If they didn't know they had ADHD, they knew that they were a problem for the grown-ups who were charged with managing them, parents, teachers, coaches, and so forth. So I think a lot of people just resist having an official diagnosis simply because it's a pain point in their life, and they may even feel a lot of shame about it. Other
yeah,
people feel like, well, what's the point of getting a diagnosis? It's not like I'm ever going to be any other way. I'm not going to take medication. I'm not going to. So I think if we're not thinking along the lines of stigma, and this is coming from the perspective of someone who was a licensed therapist for over 20 years, diagnosed hundreds of people with ADHD. And my license status is currently inactive because I'm operating exclusively as an ADHD business coach. I would say at this point in time, my philosophy about diagnosis has evolved quite a bit. And I would say at this point, if you have these traits, and if you know this is who you are and how you are, and if
mhm,
you are a regular listener of this podcast, you know that you struggle with productivity. That is in line with the executive functioning, challenges that everyone with an official diagnosis has. But I say if you're wondering, should I get diagnosed? Does it make any difference? Like, why bother? I think at this point, there are 3 legitimate reasons. One is if you want to give yourself a trial of medication, you want to see whether medication would make a difference or not, don't buy it off the internet or in a back alley. Get an official diagnosis so you can get it legally and then decide if it's for you. The second
mhm,
reason would be validation. If you feel like people think I'm a flake, people think I lack commitment, I'm disorganized, I'm a space case, I'm whatever, and a diagnosis would help you feel more validated and legitimized as a person who struggles with these traits, do it for that reason, with or without medication. And the third one would be if you work with organizations that you would like to get accommodations from. You're not going to be able to get those accommodations without a legal diagnosis, because then you fall under the Individuals with Disabilities Protection laws and regulations. So then they have to accommodate you. But legitimization, medication, or accommodation, other than that, I think you're
Yeah.
probably learning a lot of skills for managing your ADD from listening to this podcast.
Yeah. A large demographic of listeners are middle-aged women. And I think, maybe they just thought it was their personality, right? Like it wasn't a whole conversation when we were kids or going to school. And so now as they're getting to know themselves and there's more talk and your podcast and resources like this out there, they're like, hold on. That's why I do X, Y, and Z, or that's why this thing is feels more difficult and it doesn't for others. And so then therefore they're researching it and they're like, it's making sense to them. And maybe that's all the validation that they needed was like, okay, like this is clicking, like now I understand it. Well, the purpose of today's podcast for me was that if you identify or have been diagnosed or have tendencies and some traits, I wanted Diann to share with us frameworks, strategies that we can use so that we can make it our strengths or make, maybe some of these challenging areas less challenging for ourselves as running businesses.
Yep.
So where do you want to start off with someone that's identifying with some of these challenges in running a business?
Before we start tapping into that, I want to briefly comment on what you just said, Amber, about middle-aged women identifying with these traits. I think one of the reasons why the fastest demographic of individuals being diagnosed with ADHD are mid-age women for a couple of reasons. During the pandemic, when a lot of us were spending, probably far too much time on TikTok and Instagram, a number of creators started realizing once they had to work from home, wow, I'm really struggling here. Now, you and I have adapted to working from home and have done so for a number of years. But for people who were forced home by the pandemic, they were suddenly without the structure, supports, systems, supervision, and social connections that they are accustomed to getting in the workplace. And now they have to become their own boss in the same environment where they're raising kids and having sex and making dinner. So it's the lack of structure which led many women to think, why am I suddenly not able to function? The second reason is many midlife women get diagnosed when one or more of their children are diagnosed, if they happen to be seeing a child and adolescent psychiatrist who's sophisticated enough to ask the question, so, Mom, Dad, which one of you is responsible for this? Because many people still don't realize this is a genetically related, I don't even like the term disorder. I'd say, trait or condition. It is literally the way we are wired. I know that's an overused term, but it does apply. We have a different operating system. So if you've got a kiddo that's being diagnosed or being assessed, oftentimes the parents will be like, wait a minute, I didn't think there was a problem because he's just like me or she's just like you. So that was another reason. And the third reason for midlife women figuring this out is because estrogen has a protective effect on dopamine production and distribution. And dopamine is one of the issues related to ADHD traits. So when you start going through perimenopause and when you get to menopause, if it feels like the traits that you are now questioning, is this ADHD? There's no such thing as adult onset. If you have ADHD at 45, you've always had it, but you may have been able to work with it and work around it until what I call the estrogen evacuation, when your body stops producing as much estrogen due to perimenopause or menopause. Now, these traits or symptoms are worsened because of the hormone changes. So that's the third reason why a lot of midlife women are going, is this me? Now, whether you're a midlife woman, a man, a younger woman, if you are running a small business and you have these traits, you are well represented because there are studies that estimate anywhere between 27% and 67% of self-employed people have these traits. And I think one of the main reasons for that is we don't particularly like being told what to do.
Yes.
We like to figure it out ourselves. And that being said, even if we desperately need to be told what to do because we're making ourselves miserable and crazy trying to figure it out, we tend to be experiential learners who don't really want to read the instructions. I call them destructions. I'm like, let me just figure it out. And that everything is figure outable mindset lends itself really well to small business ownership because there's so many things you have to figure out. And if you like to figure things out, it's like a playground. So I think it makes a lot of sense that we find ourselves in business. Now, where do we get ourselves in trouble, especially if we have ADHD? One of the things I talk about is that folks with ADHD tend to be wired to what I call the default yes. The default yes is basically due to our impulsivity and our novelty seeking. We seek novelty because of our issues with dopamine distribution. So we're always kind of jonesing for something, shiny and new. It's why we have the whole squirrel phenomenon and shiny object syndrome. It's that if we're just doing something that we may think is a little tedious, a little ho-hum, a little monotonous, and then we come across something shiny and new, we're like, yes, please. If someone asks us to, hey, I was thinking we might do a collab. Oh, great. We tend to say yes to everything we think of and everything other people bring our way. Now, this can be confused with people pleasing. And a lot of people will say, well, that just means I'm a people pleaser, right? Like I'm just a girl that can't say no. Yes. And if you have ADHD traits, because you are novelty seeking all the time, you are literally looking for something to give your brain a little squirt of joy juice, dopamine. Your resistance to new ideas, your resistance to new commitments, your resistance to new obligations is very low because saying yes means something new is happening. Saying yes means somebody likes you. I mean, who doesn't want to hear yes when they ask for help or ask a question or ask a favor? It's yes, yes, yes. Now, what's the problem on the other end? Poor boundaries, overcommitment, overextending ourselves, and not being able to set priorities, all of which are tied in with our executive functioning challenges, the very things that you and I help people with. Now we've got literally too much on our plate. Now our default yes has gotten us in trouble because we've said yes to things impulsively through novelty seeking without thinking them through, without consulting our calendar and seeing what else we've already committed to. And because we haven't learned how to say no because of one more trait I'm going to tell you about, rejection sensitivity. People with ADHD tend to be very sensitive to criticism, rejection, and exclusion. And because it hurts us so much to hear no or to be ghosted and hear nothing, we tend to say yes to everyone else reflexively.
You mentioned that the default yes is because we're dopamine seeking. Why do you know why that there's such a sensitivity to rejection?
The sensitivity to rejection, and it would be great if this was something that we can prove there's an exact set of genes or an exact location in the brain for rejection sensitivity. But rejection sensitivity it's not in the DSM, so it is not part of the diagnostic criteria. It is related to several different things that are in the diagnostic criteria. One is emotional dysregulation.
Mm-hmm.
People with ADHD tend to have big feelings and lots of them. If we feel something, we feel it in a big way and we have to express it. If we don't have the opportunity to express it, because we're in an environment where our big feelings are not welcome. This is why many of us start our own business, because our big feelings are not welcome in the workplace, because we get shamed. And when I say big feelings, Amber, I'm not just talking about anger or disappointment. I'm talking about excitement and enthusiasm. I've
Mm-hmm.
had people call me out in the workplace and say, "You are always so passionate." And it was not a compliment. It was like, "What's wrong with you?" Now,
Incredible.
if I'm excited about something, I'm very excited. If
Mm-hmm.
I'm unhappy, I'm very unhappy. So those big emotions and those big feelings, it's also why many of us go into the dramatic arts, into the performing arts, comedy, acting, singing, dancing, and sports, because we're very expressive. So big feelings, and a lifetime of having other people say, "Why are you like this?
And
Why do
that's the
you
one I
do
thought you were gonna
XYZ?
say.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't you just
Mm-hmm.
keep your mouth shut, sit down, mind your own business, do what
Yes.
you're told, follow the program, n- no one get it done on time, show up when you're supposed to, like whatever. Why can't you just we internalize that voice and we learn how to mask, shrink, and hide, because we're programmed by our culture that how we are is not okay. So rejection sensitivity is the big emotions, the
Mm-hmm.
emotional dysregulation. Plus, we tend to be very finely tuned for intuition and empathy. This will result in something called justice sensitivity. You'll find a lot of folks with ADHD doing dog rescue, raising money for all kinds of causes. We are the ones on the front lines when anyone is being mistreated. We may not stand up for ourselves very well, and many of us don't, but we will stand up for someone in need who doesn't have a voice 6 ways from Sunday. So if you add together the empathy, the intuition, the justice sensitivity, the big emotions, and a lifetime of negative feedback about who and how you are, that
Mm-hmm.
spells rejection sensitivity. And just for the record, folks with ADHD are not the only ones who are very sensitive to rejection. Anyone who has a serious trauma history, most people in the LGBTQ community tend to be sensitive to rejection for good reason, and creative people, people in the arts with or without ADHD. It seems to be connected to that visionary thinking and that ability to envision things that others can't.
Yeah. So what I see is them turning that rejection onto themselves. So when they've been
Bingo.
told or it's implied, why can't you just? Why aren't you just like your sister or you're this or whatever that looks like? Is the language that I hear that is happening internally is if I'm broken, implied that there's something wrong. If I can just X, Y, and Z like every other business owner, and I
Mhm.
always stop that in the tracks. I'm like, it's actually not like every other business owner. We want to paint this perfect picture and then compare ourselves. And that's where they come to me and start saying, okay, just fix me. Right. And
Yes.
you're not broken. And that's why we're going to continue this conversation right now is to talk about how do you change these things that you've perceived as broken or are working against you in your business and for success. And how do you make them work for you? You are not broken.
No. And when you say we, and you've said it a couple times, are
That's
you
funny. I
are
am
you
not.
okay.
So
All right.
so I caught myself saying this too, and I just feel and I was thinking this is why I cut you off. I'm like, "Oh my gosh," like, I was thinking this as I was talking that I'm saying "we." So, no, I do not identify I do not feel like I have ADHD. But when I say "we," I feel like I'm just so connected to my audience, and I,
Yes.
like, feel like I'm always advocating for them, and so it's a "we." I feel like I'm in this with
Yes.
them, like
Yes.
I'm going to get a tear in my eye right now because that's what I was
Aw.
thinking. I was like, why do I keep defaulting to we when that's not, I do not
It's your
identify.
empathy. It's your empathy,
Yeah.
darling. It's your empathy, and because you have been working with people like me for
Yes.
all these years, and you've come to understand that we are some of the most creative, original, brilliant people on the
Incredible.
planet who often have a lot of emotional baggage and shame.
Hmm.
So you feel that for us, you know?
Yeah.
I say there's two kinds of people that hang out with people like me. Other folks with ADHD and what I call ADHD enthusiasts. And I'm going to put you in that second category because you like to help people get out of their own way. And it can be really perplexing to see someone
Mhm.
who's so creative, so hardworking, so talented, so
Mhm.
original talk to themselves like they're a piece of dog squeeze.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, I say it starts with this. And I'm going to go back a little bit. Several years ago, when I created my coaching framework for business owners with ADHD, which I call the Boss Up Breakthrough, because most of us don't want a boss, but we don't necessarily know how to be the boss of ourselves. So we need to boss up.
Mhm.
Um, the first part of it used to be self awareness, ways to develop our self awareness. And then we moved into self acceptance. I came to realize, Amber, that self acceptance has to come first because increasing our self awareness without self acceptance already in place can actually mean we find more things to hate on about ourselves. We're like, oh, yeah, thanks. I do that too. Great. Awesome. So I think radical self
That
acceptance
is very
is,
interesting.
hmm,
I'm going to tell you why, because
yeah,
I often do a call to action on my podcast or with clients. And I say, right now, your job is just to observe the behavior, observe how you show up in the
mhm,
situation, but do this with grace. Do it
yes,
without judgment. Do it like you are like watching a movie, but you're not judging. And it's because it's so hard to disconnect the two.
yeah,
And when you're observing, you immediately can go into these spirals, shame spirals, self-talk spiral,
yeah,
all of those things. However, having awareness about something is so key.
yep. So, and the way you're saying is like I happen to be a practicing Buddhist. I was first introduced to Buddhism through learning the practice of meditation and mindful awareness because I have a chronic pain problem as a result of a car accident from many years ago. So one thing led to another, and I realized, wow, I really resonate with Buddhism as a philosophy of life. So I have actually embraced it ever since. And the way you were talking about asking your listeners and clients to approach observing their ADHD traits, really any traits, is mindful awareness. Three components: openness, like I'm open to discovering what is and not telling myself stories about how it should be.
Mhm.
Curiosity that allows us to be like, oh, that's so interesting. I notice that when this happens, I do that. Huh. And
Mhm.
lack of judgment. When those three are present together, openness, curiosity, and lack of judgment, it is safe to observe what we do and how we do it so that we can figure out better ways. Radical self-acceptance, something I borrowed from, Buddhist philosophy and training, but anyone can accept it. Some people misunderstand. They think, oh, radical self acceptance is like love my ADHD. They think radical self acceptance is, well, I'm ADHD. What the fuck do you want from me? What do you expect? You know? No, it isn't. It is that this is who you are. You didn't choose to be this way. You were literally born this way. You
Mm.
will always be this way. They used to think you outgrew this. When I was in grad school in the 90s, that was the thinking of the mental health community. This is only little boys and they outgrow it by adolescence. I actually did my master's thesis on whether ADHD might not be a lifelong condition, which in fact we now know it is. So it's not going away and it doesn't need to. The goal is when we can practice radical self acceptance, we can say, there are some things I really freaking love about being me. I love my high energy. I love my creativity. I love my original way of thinking. I love my enthusiasm. I love my intuition. I love my empathy. I love my systems thinking. I love my pattern recognition. I love my all in nature. And there's some things that I really don't like, things that are painful, things that are embarrassing, things that are inconvenient, and things that actually alienate me from other people. When I refuse to feel self hate, self blame, or shame about any of them, I literally take those things off the menu. Then I can get curious about how I can support and shape those traits so they don't dominate my thinking.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So beautifully said.
Well,
All
you get
right.
sick of hating on yourself after a while. So let's talk about some typical, well, I did anyway, talk about some typical things that small business owners with ADHD traits tend to get into trouble with. Um, we tend to say yes to things very readily. That is the impulsivity and the
Mhm.
dopamine seeking. So we don't necessarily think things through. That's connected to the default, yes. But it's also connected to another concept that I talk about, which is, I guess you could say this is related to shiny object syndrome, and I call it options versus opportunity. The ADHD brain doesn't see shiny objects. We don't think of them as shiny objects. We think of them as opportunities. So the
Mhm.
skill is not learning to ignore ideas or to ignore opportunities to collaborate, opportunities to innovate, opportunities to explore a new market or pivot in your business. It's developing the discernment to know which ones are opportunities worth pursuing.
Yes.
So, and they aren't all work. I used to be so flattered when people would, oh, this is many years ago. People would say, wow, I really, really am excited to know more about your business. Can I buy you a coffee and pick your brain? And I used to think, oh, little old me. Now I realize my brain is a valuable and limited resource. I buy my own coffee and you can hire me as a consultant. Um,
Yes.
we can't say yes to everything that is like a moment of, oh, well, this could learn to something. And where this gets really important is visibility opportunities, marketing opportunities, opportunities to collab with other people. Oftentimes, and I hate that this is so, oftentimes the person who's pitching you is going to get more out of it than you will because folks with ADHD tend to say yes, tend to be all in, tend to over deliver, and then maybe later think, oh, maybe I should have asked about whether I'm going to be compensated or not. And I refer to this as we need to learn how to balance our passion and purpose with profitability. So I teach clients how to vet their ideas and vet their options so that they don't just automatically say yes and then later think, oh God, how do I get out of this?
So the default is one thing, your default personality. But once you can identify that that might be a pattern that you have, now it's about learning the skill sets to counterbalance what your default mode is.
Yes.
So I have an episode that I did a while back called Distractions Dressed Up as Opportunities.
Oh,
Because
that's right up my alley.
yeah, just what you were saying is that nobody's ever going to jump in your email box or call you or text you and be like, so I have this great distraction for you. Are you in? They're going to say, I
Exactly.
have this great opportunity. And so, how do you, for your point, and it sounds like it's a similar, approach to this is like, how do you discern the difference? And I think, won't give it away and will definitely point to your resources as well. But I think a lot of this does come from also experience in the business. Like, I remember when I was first in the business, it was like you're just waiting for that one thing to turn the corner, right? And so you're like, it's
Yes.
got to be this, right? And then you get burned, and then you're like, wow, that was flaky. And so some of it, so if you're listening and you're new and whatever, like some of this is just with experience to say, be more discerning with all these opportunities that are coming your way.
Here's what I do because to tell you the truth, This desperately seeking dopamine phenomenon that we've been talking about is not going anywhere. And I don't think it needs to, because dopamine feels freaking great. Serotonin also feels really great, but dopamine is the reward neurotransmitter. So when you do something and it feels good, you want to do more of it, right?
Yes.
Because we're being rewarded. There's another concept that I talk about called I call it the soulmate phenomenon. And it's a combination of our magical thinking and our default yes, and our impulsivity and hyperactivity. And because we tend to be incurable optimists who live in the world of possibility, we fall in love with whatever we can imagine. That's why so many of us start businesses and honestly change the world as a result of it, because we can envision things that don't exist. Where it becomes a problem is that we have this vision, we fall madly in love with it. And the neurochemistry is real. The neurochemistry that is created in our brains when we are falling madly in love with our new idea is just as rewarding as infatuation with a human being. And we all know how that usually goes. First, there's infatuation. Then you start to notice, oh my God, have you always chewed like that? Oh, you start to find fault with it. You start to think, oh my God, what was I thinking? This is the worst idea I've ever had. And next thing you know, it gets added to the abandoned pile. We tend to be really good at starting and not so good at seeing things through and finishing them. So one of the things I do with my clients is we start our 6-month coaching engagement with a core values assessment and several other assessments, but the core values I have them use as a screening device. It's like, what are your 5 core values, the 5 things that are most important to you, plus your 3 top goals and where you are at your stage of business now and for the next 6 months, so that anything we even think about doing has to run through those 3 screen doors. And if it comes out, it's in alignment with my values, it's in alignment with my stage of business, and it's in alignment with my stated goals, game on. If
So
it's
you're
not,
helping them create a customized filter, decision-making filter for these
yes.
opportunities. Is that
Because
right?
to your
Yeah.
point, yes, we need the filters to slow our frickin' roll.
Yes.
I call it curb your enthusiasm for saying yes to every new thing. It's like, but don't try to shut it down. Because first of all, I don't think we can. And secondly, we don't want to. We like being excited. We like living in the realm of possibility. We like the fact that we can literally, without even trying, get a new idea for a new product, service, or an entirely new business fully formed in our brain. And of course, we want to run with it. Why would I take that away from someone? All I say is, have your dopamine downloads. They're awesome, but put them in the parking lot and let them simmer. Don't immediately start building that thing, because most of the time it's going to be like before we hit record, you were talking about things sitting in your Amazon cart for a really long time. It serves the same purpose. Use your idea parking lot like your Amazon cart. Don't buy immediately. Let it sit there. Let it sit for a while. Come back and take a look. Is it as exciting, more exciting, or a little less? Is it like a can of carbonated soda that you pop the top and after an hour it doesn't have any bubbles anymore? That's information.
Yes. How does someone with ADHD stay committed long term to something?
Woo! That's the $1,000,000 question.
Right? Okay, so if we understand that we're looking for dopamine, what I heard, and I could be totally wrong, is that what you're speaking to is that there's only dopamine at the beginning. But if we really run this parallel to being in love with your soulmate, we know that it's a choice you make every day. You've got to do things to, you're choosing to be in love and feel those feelings. I've been married for 20 plus years. So, 20 years.
Yes.
Is it the same where if you're going to choose a project, then you're like, you choose it every day and you find the thing that gives you that dopamine hit within the project? Am I making this up?
That's such a good question. And I love the way you framed it. Yes, and I think, well, as I said, many, many, many entrepreneurs and small business owners are ADHD. I would venture to guess that 100% of serial entrepreneurs are. So, part of what I think we need to do is really, really be honest with ourselves about what kind of entrepreneur or small business owner are we? Are we someone that can pick and stick and
Mhm.
we want to have one partner, one business, one lifestyle for life? That's a different set of strategies where we are regularly finding ways to keep it fresh, to keep it fun, to keep it interesting, just like you do in a long term marriage. And you design it that way from the jump.
Mhm.
If you understand that you are at heart a serial entrepreneur, you love to launch, you love to scale, you love to build, but once it's just humming and it doesn't really need a visionary leader, it really needs operations management. And you're like, get me the hell out of here. I don't really know how much you can trick your brain into being satisfied running a business. Many of my clients will say, I didn't really realize this, but now you're making me realize I'm not a manager, I'm a leader. I
Mhm.
don't want to manage people. In fact, many people are soloists because they really don't want to manage people. They say, I have a hard enough time managing myself. But if you, in your heart of hearts, are a serial entrepreneur, then each business you start needs to be started with the end in mind. Are you growing this so you can hire a CEO to run it for you so that you can be off to your next adventure? Are you growing it to sell? Are you hoping that you get acquired? Like,
Mhm.
instead of trying to fight that, if that's who you are, you go with it and you build your business with that in mind. Now, I'm assuming more of your listeners and clients are people who are like, no, I just really want to stop myself from, I think, the extremes of boredom and burnout. If
Mm.
we get bored, we will start to destroy our business because at least crisis is exciting compared to boredom.
Okay, say
Burnout is
that
the other
again because
alternative.
I was just gonna ask you about that. This
Oh,
one
yeah.
I see so often.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
the self-created fires because
Yeah.
you are the hero and you are the
Yep.
rescuer and you
Yep.
get that little hit, and
Yep.
it's very, very real. It
Yep.
is, in my opinion, a bit of an addictive behavior
You
because it's a
betcha.
loop you don't get out of until you do. You can, but you're in it and you don't know it oftentimes.
Well, I agree. All behavior is habit forming, and folks with ADHD traits tend to have. I don't really like the term addiction, but for this, but like we tend to be easily hooked on repetitive patterns of behavior. And once your brain realizes that this is a sequence of
Mhm,
behaviors with high amounts of emotion and neurological stimulation, it's like a drug for us. So it's true. The two things that we have to avoid as business owners with ADHD are the extremes of boredom and burnout. Burnout is when we don't pace ourselves, when we don't rest, when we don't take time off, when we are hardcore on the hustle. A lot of that is because we are easily drawn into hyper focus and we don't know how to I have a whole framework around starting, stopping and shifting gears because that covers so much territory for folks like me. We have trouble getting started, procrastination, resistance, avoidance,
mhm,
focus. We have trouble finishing because we keep fluffing the pillows and wanting to make it just a little bit better and we're hyper focused and it doesn't feel done so we keep going. And then we have trouble with context shifting. So, literally transitioning from one thing to the next, even transitioning from work to family time at the end of the day, oftentimes needs a transition ritual because we have trouble shifting gears. So, I think if you are the person who wants to not burn your business down or keep starting fires so that you get the stimulation of putting them out, first and
mhm,
foremost, radical self-acceptance. We're not hating on you. We see you. We feel you. We are you. If this is who you are and this is how you are, you can't really change that about yourself. You need a high level of stimulation on a regular basis. So instead of trying to change that, let's find healthier ways to get that don't handicap your business. Sometimes we're just occupying ourselves with roles in our business that not only don't stimulate us, they deplete us and we freaking hate them. So we'll do just about anything to create relief from that. All right, you may not be able to change that tendency, but you can change that maladaptive behavior. And by the way, when you mentioned fire, putting out fires, most firefighters are ADHD. I happen to know quite a few of them. Who else would go into a burning building? By choice, right? Most first responders, a lot of first responders have ADHD and they don't get diagnosed because that would rule them out. Right? They can't have something like that on their record. Military, like wherever the action is, that's where people like us can be found. Now, if you don't have enough of the right kind of action in your business to stimulate you, you have two general courses. One is remove the friction in your business so that you feel less resistance and resentment. And there's lots of ways to do that through automation, delegation, and elimination, what I call right sizing. You could shrink your business down a little so there's white space in your life for other things that allow you to scratch that dopamine seeking itch, like take up a hobby, take up scuba diving, take up surfing, take up pottery. You don't have to get all of your needs met through your business, but so many of us try to get all of our needs met through our small business and then feel burdened by it. So we act out by sabotaging the business because at least it's stimulation. You can right size your business in a whole variety of ways and create white space in your life to do other exciting things. You can also create excitement in your business that isn't damaging to your business. Some of the people that I've interviewed on ADHD-ish, my podcast for business owners with big ideas and busy brains, they leave space in their business for pop-up offers. I recently interviewed Erin Olilla, who created these pop-up offers that she has them timed so that they don't interfere with her launches or with her ongoing offers, but allow her short-term, time-limited bits of excitement and some extra cash inflow. I have another woman that I've interviewed who only works in creative sprints. In her business, most people work on retainer. Retainer is usually not so well suited to someone with ADHD because it's long-term, open-ended, rinse and repeat, aka boring. So she works in creative sprints where she works with, instead of a bunch of different clients at the same time, doing like fractional work, a little bit of work for each of the clients. That's boring to her. She works with one client at a time in a creative sprint where they work really quickly to create all of their brand assets. Then she takes a break and she does the next one. That allows her to work with her ADHD brain and keep her level of interest, motivation, and energy very high for each and every client. She tried to do it the other way and she was constantly blowing shit up.
Yes. So what I'm hearing is to build a business model that can support your strengths and to hire, automate, find resources that can support your business because your business is a separate entity. I don't think that's said enough that we are not our businesses. Our businesses are a separate entity. And whether you identify or have ADHD, our businesses always need more from us than we have capacity to give, skill set to give, experience to give. And so if we can just think of it that way as like, great. So how am I going to support my business for gaps? And maybe yours is a known gap of not fully executing an idea. There are people out there, wait for it, that love the details and love to execute.
Yes.
You are literally a blessing in their lives because now they get to make money and provide this amazing service that they love to do, but they won't be able to do that because they're also not in the lane of thinking of these big ideas, these big making these big plans. So therefore there's nothing for them to manage and execute and have details on. The two of you together both get to stay in your lane. Now, I'm loosely saying the two of you, but for example, in this example, you get to stay in your lane and they get to stay in their lane, and the overall business is served.
And to that point, I agree 1,000%. I think this notion that if we are a small business owner, we have to be good at everything, whether you have ADHD or not, that's not possible.
Not at all.
And it is also exhausting. So being able to figure out what are the things you are uniquely good at that you actually enjoy doing and they make you money, that's what you should be doing. And as quickly as possible, hiring or outsourcing to other people to do the other stuff. There are just things that I could do, but it will slow me down and make me feel resentful. And then I'll be jonesing for dopamine and probably wandering into social media or Netflix or some other place where I have no business being, which will further deplete me and further set me up to do more destructive things that don't help my business. And some people really honestly need to take social media apps off their phone as a first step to figuring this stuff out because, and we all love this stuff, but these apps are created to addict us to chronic distractions whenever we feel discomfort. And it's a hard habit to break because distraction is usually our biggest enemy. Procrastination, distraction, and perfectionism are often the biggest practical behavior patterns that folks with ADHD struggle with. So if one of the things you need to do to figure the rest of this out is to just take a break from social media, it'll still be there if and when you go back. But it's really hard to discipline yourself and say, oh, I'm just going to spend 10 minutes. No, you're not. Oh, I'll set a timer. Yeah, and you won't stop when it goes off. Don't set yourself up for that. Just like if you're going on a diet, don't join a cake subscription. It's just too hard. Don't make things harder for yourself.
Failure, yes.
Is there a cake subscription? I just made that up. I don't know. I don't want to look into it.
Maybe that's your next big idea.
No. I do not. I suffer no shortage of ideas. I need to discipline myself not to go running off with something new.
Yes. Okay. This has been such a great conversation. I truly enjoyed it. Your frameworks, your explanation, so many people are going to listen to this, and you literally said it in the opening. You're going to be nodding and laughing. I agree. Laughing at like the irony, you're like, yes, that is me, or like people are identifying, and nodding because you just gave so many people the gift of being seen by really truly understanding what their challenges are. And that is not a small gift. People need to be seen so that they can understand that there's hope, so they can understand that there's a different way they want to experience their businesses. And so thank you so much for sharing all that today. I want to make sure that our listeners definitely know where to find you. So share your podcast information, anything else you'd like to share with our listeners before we wrap up today.
You bet. Everything about me can be found on my website, DiannWingertCoaching.com. You'll want to note the spelling in the show notes because it has my first name has funky spelling. My podcast is ADHD-ish. And around the time that this episode is being released, I have recently launched a digital clone version of myself in beta that anybody who wants to sign up for it can play with. And you can actually interact with my digital clone. It's called AI. I'll make sure that Amber has a link to it and have a conversation with it because it has been exclusively programmed to my perspective, my point of view, my expertise, and my frameworks. So, and I want more people to experience it and give me feedback about what that's like. So I'd love it if some of your listeners would do that.
Incredible. We will share all the links in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you for the work you're doing. And I just love the name of your podcast. I said that when I emailed you to invite you. I just love that you did rebranding and a rename of it. And I just love it. So I think you nailed it.
I'd made it ADHD-ish to take the emphasis off people thinking they need to be officially diagnosed.
Yes, I got that right away. That's what I'm saying. Your branding and naming was perfect because that's how I took it. So well done. Well done.
Yay.
All right, Diann, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, friend.
Whether this conversation described your brain perfectly or it helped you understand someone you work with or care about, I hope you heard the message loud and clear. You are not broken, and neither are they. Sometimes what looks like productivity problems is really just a mismatch between how you're wired and how you've been trying to run your business. Well, I sure hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did with Diann, but I need to be straight with you. No change, no change. Without taking action, nothing will change for you or your business. So, what can that look like after today's episode? Well, the next time a new idea, which might be in 5 minutes or less, or an opportunity lands in front of you, don't say yes and don't say no. Put it in what Diann calls your idea parking lot and come back to it in 48 hours. Just let it sit there in the parking lot. If the excitement has fizzled like a flat soda, you just saved yourself from a commitment you didn't need. If it has still got bubbles and excitement and you want to explore it intentionally, then I invite you to do so. That's it. Just create some space between the idea, between the ask that somebody else has of you, and the automatic yes. And circle back on it when you've had some time to really intentionally think about what you are saying yes to. And the magic of this is the things that you do say yes to are going to be the things that most excite you, that you get to show up your best in, and you can let the rest go. Now, if you've loved this conversation with Diann, I'm going to invite you to go back and listen to episode 263, where Diann joined us for the first time. And that episode dives into ADHD and business ownership as a case study, where she's pulling back the curtains of how did she become an expert in this industry? How does she leverage these traits in her own business? And some stories about her clients. So together, these two conversations will give you a really complete picture of ways in which you can experiment in showing up your best in your business. If you've enjoyed today's episode, I am going to invite you to share it with a friend. You may have been thinking of somebody as you were listening to this episode. Maybe it was someone that you saw these traits in and you're like, hey, I can just share this with them so they don't feel alone, they don't feel different, they don't feel broken, and that they can understand that there's a path forward for really leveraging these traits that some try to avoid. And here on the podcast, we want everyone to just show up their best. And part of that is honoring all their different sides of themselves, because that's what is unique about them running their business. So, if you're thinking of somebody, you have somebody in mind, be sure to share this episode with them. And if you're new here, be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss another episode. So that's my straight talk for today. Until next time, have a productive week.